Brainy Britons backing Brexit. The research, published ahead of this week's crucial Commons vote on the EU Withdrawal Bill, accuses Remainers of showing contempt for working-class Brexit voters. What is to be done? Keep all Northerners in the North? Lock all white van men in their van? Disenfranchise all those who haven't got a degree, or a profession, or who can't speak European good like what we can? Says the study, consisting of a series of papers mostly by young academics. Published by Briefings for Brexit, BFB, a group of university professors and lecturers centered on Cambridge University, the research highlights the contempt for democracy at the heart of the so-called Remainer revolt. Robert Toombs, Emeritus Professor of French History at Cambridge and the co-chairman of BFB, writes, "The unusual nature of the Remainer revolt is however shown by the extraordinary nature of the arguments that have been used, arguments that could be used to discredit any democratic procedure, and which have rarely if ever been heard in any advanced country since the 19th century. For example, that most voters did not know what they were voting for, that working-class voters were too ignorant to make a choice, that people without advanced education should have their political rights reduced, that older people should have no right to an equal democratic voice. Leaving aside basic ethical questions concerning equal rights, questions that most of us would have thought had been resolved by the end of the 19th century, if not earlier, these views show an astonishing misunderstanding of what democracy is and what it is for. They lack the slightest degree of historical awareness. Yet they are put forward with assurance by people who openly regard themselves as the epitome of enlightenment and intelligence." Professor Toombs says that Remainers fall into three categories: ideological Remainers with a strong emotional link to the European project, professional Remainers, acting out of narrow self-interest, and worried Remainers, who were moved by the propaganda of Project Fear during the referendum campaign and who continue to be swayed by alarmist predictions of economic disaster after Brexit. Many Remainers also subscribe to declinism, the false assumption dating back to the 1950s that Britain is a diminished and a weak country unable to function economically and politically on its own, Professor Toombs adds. One of the papers, written by Joanna Williams, an author and former university lecturer, warns the education system closes down scope for debate at school and university. Dr. Williams explains that this ensures universities fail to produce independent-minded critical thinkers. It instead creates conformist and obedient citizens far too fearful of being labeled racist or nationalist to dare challenge the pro-EU consensus that dominates the graduate professions in which they later seek employment. Pamela Dow, Chief Reform Officer at Catch-22, a not-for-profit social care firm, amplifies this point in her paper, claiming the default of civil servants is minimizing harm, with any change to the status quo constituting harm. This is exacerbated when the change is perceived by officials to be an act of self-destruction, not a legitimate democratic decision.